They called her the Augment. No name, no introduction. Just a word that meant temporary, replaceable, not worth learning. Lieutenant Cole Ryder said it once during the briefing on the C-130, and that was enough. The rest of the platoon understood what it meant. She was equipment, something to carry the radio and stay out of the way. She sat alone at the rear of the cargo bay, the way people sit when they already know they are not welcome. Field pack between her boots. Rifle vertical against her shoulder. No combat patch on her right sleeve. No deployment ribbons. No insignia beyond a single rank pin and a name tape that read Vance in black letters on tan fabric. Sergeant Callan Marsh studied her from across the bay the way a man studies something he cannot quite identify. He had been doing this for 11 years. He knew what soldiers looked like after they had been somewhere real. There was a quality to them, a kind of permanent stillness underneath the movement, like the eye of a storm. Still waters with tremendous depth beneath. Vance had it. She was not watching the other soldiers. She was not watching the desert through the small porthole windows as the aircraft began its descent. She was watching nothing and watching everything in the way of a person who had already processed every variable in the room and found nothing that required immediate attention. Her fingers moved occasionally against her thigh. Small, precise movements, counting something invisible. Corporal Travis Webb leaned close to Marsh and kept his voice under the engine noise. She looks like she finished basic 6 months ago. Marsh did not respond. Her file came through this morning, Specialist Lee Cassell said from his other side. Transfer from somewhere. Half the pages are blacked out. Webb snorted quietly. Redacted means desk job. Means she made someone angry and they sent her here instead of processing her out properly. Marsh watched Vance's hand move against her thigh. 3 taps. Pause. 2 taps. Pause. He had seen that pattern before. It was not anxiety. It was calculation. He looked away before she noticed him watching. The ramp dropped at grid 7 and the desert came at them like a wall. Heat so dense it had physical weight. The air tasted of baked mineral and distant fuel. The sun was already past its midpoint, flooding the landscape in a hard white light that flattened everything and made distances impossible to judge. Grid 7 was a shallow depression in the Arizona high desert. A natural bowl surrounded by low ridges with sightlines extending 2 kilometers in most directions, defensible in theory, exposed in practice. The kind of position that looked good on a map and felt wrong the moment you stood inside it. Ryder called the perimeter assignments before the aircraft noise had finished fading. He was efficient. Marsh gave him that. Quick decisions, clean commands. The lieutenant had been in the Army 8 years and had the bearing of a man who had never yet been seriously wrong about anything, which meant he had not yet been tested by something large enough to matter, Vance Ryder said without looking at her. You are with headquarters element. Communications and observation. Standard monitoring frequencies. You do not engage unless I give you a direct order. Understood, sir. Her voice was flat and even, and gave away nothing. She moved toward the center of the position without waiting to be directed, unpacked the radio system with the particular efficiency of someone who has done a task so many times that thought is no longer required. No fumbling, no checking the diagram. The antenna went up in one continuous motion. The frequency was encrypted and locked within minutes. Marsh had timed her without meaning to. 6 minutes and 40 seconds. He looked at Webb. Webb was not looking at the radio. He was looking at the dust, pretending he had not noticed. The afternoon settled into the particular misery of desert waiting. Temperature climbed past 115. The rocks became too hot to touch without gloves. Soldiers found whatever shade the equipment and sandbags could offer, which was not much, and they drank water at a rate that made the supply sergeant nervous. Vance drank less than anyone. She moved along the perimeter in the early evening, checking positions with slow, methodical attention, her eyes moving across the ground in patterns. Not random sweeping. Systematic grids. Marsh fell in beside her without being invited, partly because he was curious, and partly because he was the senior NCO, and it was his job to know what every member of the platoon was doing. She did not acknowledge his presence or object to it. "What are you looking at?" he asked. "Ground sign." He looked at the sand and rock around them. He saw nothing but sand and rock. She stopped and crouched near a section of disturbed ground to the south of their perimeter. He crouched beside her. The surface looked like every other section of desert surface to him. She pointed with one finger, a gesture so small it would have been invisible from 3 feet away. Tire tracks, she said. Deep ones. 3 vehicles. They circled this position. He looked where she was pointing and began to understand what he was seeing. The wind had softened the edges, but the impressions were real. Wide tread, heavy vehicles. The arc of the track curved around their position like a parenthesis. When he asked, 2 hours before we arrived, Marsh felt something move through his chest that was not quite cold but was adjacent to it. He stood. She stood with him. The movement fluid and unhurried. We should tell the lieutenant, he said. She nodded once. Ryder listened to the report, standing in the command position with his arms crossed and his expression patient in the way that senior people are patient with junior people who have misunderstood something basic. Tire tracks in a desert, he said. There are towns in this region. Civilian traffic. These tracks circled our position, sir. You cannot determine intent from a tire track, Sergeant. He turned back to his map. We hold here as ordered. The supply convoy comes through in 6 hours. Grid 7 needs to be secured. Marsh walked back to where Vance had returned to the radio. She was monitoring frequencies, making small notes in a weatherproof notebook with a pencil worn down to a stub. She did not look up when he approached. He dismissed it, Marsh said. I know. You heard I expected it, she said. Her pencil moved across the page. Not resignation, just the flat acknowledgement of someone who has made a prediction and watched it confirmed. Marsh stood beside her for a moment. Then he went to walk the perimeter again, because it was his job, and because he needed to think. The sun went down fast. The temperature dropped 40 degrees in 90 minutes, the particular brutality of high desert nights, and the darkness came down with weight and finality. Stars appeared in numbers that city people never saw. The wind picked up from the northeast and sand moved across the ground in low, continuous streams. Vance remained at the radio. At some point past midnight, Marsh found himself standing near Corporal Ray Decker's fighting position, unable to sleep. Decker was on watch, a steady soldier, the kind who did not complain and did not need managing. They stood together in the dark for a while without talking. Then the eastern ridgeline lit up. Not much. 3 or 4 muzzle flashes, the sound arriving a half-second later. Controlled bursts aimed at the center of their position. Harassing fire. The kind designed to disrupt sleep and test reactions, not to destroy. Contact northeast, Marsh called, rolling into his own fighting position. Return fire controlled. The platoon responded the way trained soldiers respond, without thinking, the body doing what repetition had made automatic. Rifles came up. Muzzle flashes strobed in the darkness. Tracer rounds made red lines across the night and the ridgeline. Marsh fired 2 bursts and then looked for Vance. She had not brought her rifle up. She was prone beside the radio monocular pressed to her eye, and she was not looking at the ridgeline where the muzzle flashes were. She was looking south, 45 degrees off target, completely the wrong direction. Vance, he called. Get your weapon on the contact. She did not respond. The monocular continued its slow, methodical movement across the southern terrain. He was going to say it again, and then she spoke, her voice flat and carrying under the gunfire. Tire tracks, she said. Fresh. They circled us again in the last 2 hours. She paused. 4 heat signatures moving up the southern approach. One is carrying something large. Marsh swung his thermal optics south, and his breath stopped. She was right. 4 figures moving in tactical formation up the dry creek bed. The one in the rear was carrying a tube across his shoulders, an RPG, and they were already inside 400 meters and closing fast. Lieutenant Marsh shouted across the position. Southern threat, 4 hostiles, heavy weapon inside 400. Ryder's voice on the command net was tight. I don't have eyes on. Check thermal south, Marsh said. Now. A pause. Then Ryder's voice changed. All positions shift partial element to south. Brennan, take your team. But they were already inside 300 meters. And the man with the RPG was slowing, steadying himself the way a man steadies himself before he fires something that will kill people. Marsh saw it. Vance saw it first. She had already moved. Not running. Moving in the particular way of someone whose body knows what it is doing before the mind has finished the instruction. Low, fast, direct. She unslung her rifle without breaking stride, dropped to a prone position on a flat rock at the perimeter edge, and brought the weapon to her shoulder in one motion, so practiced it looked like water finding its level. The elevation knob. 2 clicks. She did not use the scope. She used the iron sights in complete darkness against a target at what Marsh later measured at 683 meters. She fired once. The sound was different from the other gunfire. Sharper, more deliberate, like a period at the end of a sentence. The man with the RPG folded backward. The weapon fell from his hands and the warhead detonated on impact with the rocky ground. The explosion was a compressed orange sphere that turned the night briefly white, and in that white light every soldier in the position saw it clearly. Saw the weapon fall. Saw the other 3 figures scatter and run, all aggression gone, replaced instantly by the animal need to be somewhere else. The firefight from the ridgeline stopped 30 seconds later. They had lost their coordination. The desert went quiet. No one moved for a moment. Then Webb said quietly to no one in particular, "What the hell was that?" Marsh walked to where Vance was standing. She had already ejected the spent casing and chambered a fresh round. Her rifle was on safe. She was watching the southern terrain with the same flat attention she applied to everything. "That was 600 meters, he said. 683, she said. Wind from the northeast at 7 knots. Temperature dropped 8 degrees in the last hour. Required 1 MOA elevation adjustment. Who taught you to shoot like that?" She looked at him for a moment. Her eyes were steady and dark, and gave away nothing except perhaps the faint suggestion of a long memory. "Practice," she said. Ryder appeared. His jaw was set, and his voice had the particular tension of a man who is angry and also aware that his anger may not be entirely justified. "You fired without authorization," he said. "Yes, sir. You could have compromised our position. You could have drawn more fire onto." She looked at him calmly. "The man was 10 seconds from putting a rocket into the southern perimeter," she said. "With the wire down on that side, it would have hit the casualty collection point. 4 people minimum." Ryder was quiet for a moment. "That is not your call to make." She did not argue. She simply looked at him with the patience of someone who has heard this sentence before in different voices in different places and has made her peace with the fact that it will keep being said. "You are on report," he said. "We will address this in full when we return to base." "Understood, sir." Ryder walked away. Vance turned back to the radio. Marsh stood where he was looking at her, and something moved through him that he could not immediately name. Morning came in shades of copper and brown, the sun pulling itself over the eastern ridgeline and beginning its daily work of making the desert hostile. The platoon assessed the night. The southern approach showed clear evidence of vehicle movement and a prepared firing position for the RPG team. This had not been improvised. Someone had known they were coming. Marsh found Vance at the perimeter edge, standing with her notebook open, looking east. "They knew we were here before we arrived," he said. "Yes, that means the position is compromised." "The entire grid is compromised," she said. "They have our defensive layout, our personnel count, our weapons load." She looked at him briefly. "They will come again tonight. Larger force, better coordinated. They will use the supply convoy timeline against us. Ryder needs to hear this." She looked back east. "I already told him. This morning. About the position." She paused. "He said we hold as ordered." Marsh went to find the lieutenant. He found him at the command position studying his tablet, and he delivered the assessment without attribution, speaking in the measured tone of a senior NCO making a tactical recommendation. "Canyon network to the west. Better terrain. Interlocking fields of fire. The current position is pre-registered for indirect fire." Ryder listened. His expression was the expression of a man receiving information he does not wish to receive. "Our orders are to hold grid 7, he said. "Sir, if the position is mapped." "Our orders," Ryder said again, "are to hold grid 7. The supply convoy needs this grid clear. That is the mission. We execute the mission." Marsh returned to Vance. He said no. She was already writing in her notebook. The afternoon wore on with the particular heaviness of desert hours, when you know something is coming and cannot stop it from coming. Soldiers moved through their routines. Weapons were cleaned, water was rationed, watch rotations were maintained. Vance did not sleep in the afternoon the way the off-watch soldiers did. She moved, slowly, continuously, always doing something, checking wire, adjusting antenna alignment, walking the interior of the perimeter in careful loops. At one point, she stopped at Decker's position and spent 20 minutes talking with him in a low voice, going over fields of fire, explaining angles Marsh had not thought to consider. Decker listened with the attention of a man who could tell he was learning something real. Cassell found Vance near the radio in the early evening. The two women moved together along the fighting positions in the gathering dark, checking sandbag placement testing sightlines. Marsh watched from a distance. He went to his pack and took out his tablet. He accessed the personnel records database and entered the name from the file report he had pulled up 2 days ago when Vance's transfer had come through. Most of it was blacked out. Long sections of her service history were simply gone, replaced by the words redacted in capital letters. Deployments redacted. Special qualifications redacted. Awards and decorations redacted. He scrolled to the bottom of the visible record and found a fragment that had survived the redaction. A call sign preserved by accident or oversight in a cross-reference field, Desert Hawk. He looked up. Vance was standing at the perimeter edge, still now, for the first time all day, looking east into the darkness. Her silhouette was sharp against the stars. The rifle was on her shoulder, and her head was very slightly tilted, the way a person tilts their head when they are listening to something no one else can hear. Marsh looked back at the screen. Desert Hawk. He had heard that name once 4 years ago in a conversation between two officers who had gone quiet when they noticed him nearby. One of them had said the name with a particular kind of weight, the weight you put on a name that means something more than a name. He had not asked. It was not his place to ask. He closed the tablet. He stood and walked toward the perimeter and stood beside her without speaking. The night was very large and very dark, and the desert stretched out in every direction without mercy or comfort. She did not turn when he approached. After a while, she said quietly, "They will come at 05:15. He looked at her profile. "How do you know?" She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Because that is when I would come." The wind came off the desert cold and carrying sand, and the stars burned overhead without warmth, and Marsh stood beside her and understood, in the way a man understands things he cannot prove, that she was right. He went to find Ryder one more time. The lieutenant was in the command position reviewing the convoy schedule, planning for a morning that Marsh was no longer certain was going to look anything like what Ryder had planned. Sir Marsh said, "I think we need to talk about our defensive posture." Ryder looked up. Marsh told him what Vance had said. He did not use her name. He presented it as his own analysis because she had told him to and because he understood now why she had told him to. Ryder listened. His expression did not change. "Hold the position," he said. "That is the order." Marsh nodded. He walked back to his fighting hole and sat down with his rifle across his knees and looked at the eastern sky, where the first very faint suggestion of a different quality of darkness was beginning to form along the horizon. 05:15. He set his watch. The mortars came at 05:15. Not one or two ranging shots, not probing fire to test the response. They came in clusters, 4 and 5 at a time, walking across the defensive position with the methodical patience of someone who had done this before and knew exactly where to step. The first salvo hit the northern wire. The second walked south. The third found the eastern fighting positions, and the night became noise and light, and the particular chaos that training prepares you for but never fully approximates. "Incoming," the cry went up from 3 positions simultaneously. Marsh was already moving before the word finished, rolling left out of his sleeping position and into the fighting hole with the automatic grace of a man who has practiced the motion until it lives in his body rather than his mind. Dirt and rock fragments rained down around him. The smell of burned explosive hung in the cold air. He keyed his radio. "All positions, status report." The responses came back fragmented and overlapping. "North position taking fire. East wire is down in 2 sections. South, we have south position. Wait, we have movement south." Ryder was already on the battalion net. His voice was controlled, but Marsh could hear the tightness underneath it, the particular strain of a man processing too many inputs at once. "Battalion, this is Viper 2-1. We are under heavy indirect fire grid 7. Request immediate counter battery over." The response came back fast and clean and terrible. Viper 2-1 Battalion. "No artillery available at this time. Nearest air support is 45 minutes out. Recommend you hold position and return fire over. 45 minutes. Marsh looked at his tactical display and saw what Ryder was seeing. 3 clusters of movement converging on their position from the north, the east, and the southeast. The icons were rough estimates based on thermal observation, but the numbers were not good. The smallest cluster was 12 men. The largest was twice that. Then the technical came over the northern ridge. It appeared against the dark sky like something from a different era. A pickup truck with a heavy machine gun mounted in the bed, moving fast, the gunner already firing before the vehicle had fully crested the rise. The 50 caliber rounds were not like rifle fire. They did not crack. They tore. They punched through sandbags and shredded equipment and forced every soldier in the northern sector to press themselves flat against the earth and stay there. The entire northern defensive line went silent. With the northern sector suppressed, the eastern assault team began to move. Marsh could see them through his thermal sight, a line of figures advancing in short bounds using the terrain, working toward the gap in the eastern wire that the mortar rounds had opened. He fired, shifted, fired again. But he was one rifle and the gap was wide and the figures kept moving. Ryder appeared at the command position, entrance handset pressed to his ear, his other hand flat on the tactical display. Marsh crossed to him in a low run and arrived in time to see the lieutenant's face in the dim glow of the screen. 3 directions, Ryder said, as if saying it aloud might organize it into something manageable. 70 plus no support for 45 minutes, wire down on 2 sides. He looked at the display. The 3 red clusters moved steadily inward. Marsh waited. Ryder did not move. It was not cowardice. Marsh understood that clearly then and later when he thought about it in the particular way a soldier thinks about moments that change things. Ryder was not afraid of the enemy outside the wire. He was afraid of being wrong. He had been trained to make decisions within a system, with information, with authorization, with a chain of command that confirmed his choices before he made them. He had never been in a situation where the system was unavailable and the decision had to be made with nothing but his own judgment and 4 minutes of time. He froze the way a processor freezes when it receives instructions it cannot parse. Vance appeared at Marsh's shoulder. She did not announce herself. She was simply there, rifle-slung eyes on the tactical display, reading the situation with the flat efficiency of someone doing arithmetic. She looked at Ryder. "Give me tactical control of defensive fire," she said. "You handle medevac coordination and the battalion net for extraction. We cannot win this engagement, but we can make them pay enough to hold until air support arrives." Ryder turned to her. His jaw tightened. His voice dropped. "You are a private first class," he said. "You do not have the authority, sir. You do not have the—" Then the mortar round hit the southern perimeter. Not a near miss. A direct impact on the primary southern fighting position, the one Vance had recommended pulling back from 2 days ago because it was pre-registered and exposed. The explosion was close enough that Marsh felt the pressure wave in his chest. Through the smoke and the ringing in his ears, he heard the medic's voice on the radio, high and urgent, in a way that medical personnel were trained never to sound. "Decker is down. Decker, I need a medic at South Primary. He is losing blood fast. I need—" Ryder looked at the display. He looked at the radio handset in his hand. He looked at the 3 red clusters moving inward on a position that was no longer capable of defending 3 sides simultaneously. He set the handset down. He did not speak. He simply took 1 step back from the display, a small movement, almost nothing, but it meant everything. It was the step of a man removing himself from a decision he could no longer carry alone. "Do it," he said. "Keep them alive." Vance took the tactical radio before he finished the sentence. She moved to the highest point in the command position, a stack of supply crates reinforced with sandbags, and she climbed it in 2 steps and stood exposed against the sky with a view of the entire defensive perimeter and the terrain beyond it. Marsh positioned himself below her. If someone drew a bead on that elevated silhouette, Marsh intended to make that a costly decision. Her voice came out across the platoon net, flat and carrying and completely without the particular kind of tightness that combat puts in most voices. "All positions, this is Vance. Tactical control is with me. Acknowledge by position." A half-second of silence. Then one by one the squad leaders responded. "North position acknowledged. East position acknowledged. South position, what's left of us, acknowledged." "Good," she said. "North position. The technical is your primary problem and I'm going to solve it. Shift your suppressing fire to the ridgeline, not the vehicle. Keep their dismounted support from reinforcing the gunner. Do it now and do not stop. The northern sector came back to life. Rifles opened up on the ridge. East position. You have scouts in front of the main assault element. They are trying to draw your fire and mark your positions for the RPG teams behind them. Do not engage the lead figures. Let them pass through the wire gap. Your targets are the men with the tubes 100 meters behind the scouts. Acknowledge. East position, copy, holding fire. She was already looking south. South position. Pull back 15 meters to the secondary fighting holes. Your current location has been zeroed by their mortar crew, and they will walk another round onto it in the next 2 minutes. Move now. A voice on the radio strained. We pull back, we lose the sight line on. You pull back or you die where you are. Move. The sound of movement on the southern radio. Boots on rock. Equipment dragging. Then she shifted and brought the rifle up, and Marsh watched her do something he had never seen done at range in darkness under fire. She found the technical vehicle through the iron sights, tracked it as it moved in a weaving pattern across the uneven ground, and she waited. Not for a clear shot, for a specific moment. The vehicle hit a natural ramp in the terrain, a low shelf of rock, and for half a second the front wheels left the ground and the truck was suspended and the driver had no steering and no options. She fired. Single shot. The driver's head dropped forward. The vehicle swerved hard left front wheel, catching on a boulder, and the momentum and the weight did the rest. The truck went over sideways, the mounted gun tearing free of its mounting the fuel tank, finding the spark it needed. The explosion rolled upward in a column of orange and black that lit the entire northern sector. The northern assault team saw their support burn. They did not stop. But they slowed, and slowing was enough. East position, Vance said without pausing. Your targets are now visible. RPG teams are breaking cover to advance. Engage the rear element first. Take the tubes before they can be shouldered. The eastern sector opened up with focused fire, and Marsh heard even from his position the difference between undirected shooting and shooting that knows exactly what it is looking at. South position, she said. Secondary holes should be established. Give me a status. In position. Sight lines are better from here, actually. Good. Hold fire until I tell you. She looked south, and Marsh followed her gaze and saw the assault element moving up the dry creek bed in a rush, confident now that the southern defenders had retreated. They were bunched tighter than they should have been, moving fast, not watching the flanks. She did not fire at the lead men. She watched the column move until she could see the figures at the rear, the ones with the different posture, the ones whose heads moved differently, whose positions relative to the others indicated command. 3 shots. Spaced by perhaps a second each. 3 figures in the rear of the southern column went down within a 4-second window. The column stopped. Not from the casualties. A column of that size could absorb 3 casualties and keep moving. It stopped because the 3 people who knew what came next were no longer able to say. The front element looked back. The middle element looked at the front element. The momentum that had carried them up the creek bed dissolved in the space of a few seconds, replaced by the particular confusion of soldiers who have lost their direction. South position, Vance said. Crossfire now. North angle, do not shoot across the east position. Engage. The southern assault element walked into fire from 2 directions, and it was over very quickly after that. Cease fire, she called. Conserve ammunition. Watch the wire. The desert went quiet in the strange total way that only happens after sustained gunfire, the silence so complete it felt like a physical presence. Marsh became aware of his own breathing. He counted. 7 minutes. She climbed down from the supply crates with the same efficiency with which she had climbed up, and he noticed as she passed him that her hands were not entirely steady. Not much. A faint tremor in the fingers of her left hand as she adjusted the radio frequency. Not fear. Something else. The body processing what it had just done after 4 years of not doing it, the way a long-dormant machine vibrates when the power comes back on. She keyed the radio. Ryder. He was there. His voice was different now. Not the tight control of before. Something had come loose in him, not in a bad way, in the way of a man who has put down something very heavy. Go ahead. 4 wounded, she said. I need you on medevac coordination now. Decker is the critical case. Femoral bleed pattern based on the impact location and the blood volume on the radio report. He has been down for approximately 6 minutes. She paused. Tell the medic to pack the wound high in the crease and hold pressure with both hands. Do not use a tourniquet. until the medic physically confirms arterial flow. Ryder relayed the instruction. 30 seconds later, the medic's voice came back tighter now, but controlled. Packing now. She is right, it is high. We have it. Battalion Ryder said, his voice steady again, oriented now on a task he could perform. Viper 2-1 requesting emergency medevac and reinforcement grid 7-4 casualties. 1 critical LZ will be marked with purple smoke on approach. How copy? The helicopter came 18 minutes later. Fast and low door gunners scanning, touching down for 90 seconds, exactly enough time to load the wounded and drop 6 fresh soldiers and 4 crates of ammunition. Then it was up and gone, rotor wash flattening the sand in a wide circle. The remaining assault elements did not press another attack. Marsh stood at the perimeter and watched the dark terrain and understood what had happened. They had seen the support vehicle burn. They had lost their Southern Assault Element's command structure. They had watched a position they believed was broken respond with coordinated, accurate fire from multiple sectors. And now there was a helicopter, which meant there was more where that came from. They were done for tonight. He walked back to the command position and found Ryder standing outside it, looking at the terrain. Not at his tablet, not at the radio, just at the desert. Marsh stopped beside him. After a while, Ryder said, I should have moved the position 2 days ago. Marsh did not agree or disagree. That was not his job right now. I should have listened the first time, Ryder said. Still, Marsh said nothing. How many did she drop, Ryder said. In the engagement. Marsh thought about it. 14 confirmed. Possibly more in the Southern Element when they scattered, but I cannot call those confirmed. 14, Ryder said. In 7 minutes. He said it the way you say a number that refuses to become real no matter how many times you say it. Inside the command position, Vance had returned to the radio, monitoring frequencies, making notes in her weatherproof notebook with the stub of her pencil. Her rifle was propped against the sandbag wall beside her, and she sat cross-legged with her back straight and her eyes moving across the terrain through the gap in the command post entrance. The tremor in her left hand was gone. Marsh sat down nearby and watched her for a moment. You knew the femoral detail, he said. About Decker. I saw the blood pattern in the casualty report, she said. The volume and the location. Femoral bleeds present a specific way. You knew that from training. She was quiet for a moment. From experience, she said. He let that sit. After a while, he took out his tablet. He had pulled up the database earlier and found the call sign in the cross-reference field. Now he went further. He accessed the archived operational reports through a search query a contact at battalion personnel had mentioned to him once, half seriously, as the kind of search you ran when you wanted to find something the system was trying to hide. He typed carefully. Desert Hawk. The result loaded slowly through the encrypted network. A single document, most of it redacted into long black bars that obliterated entire paragraphs, but fragments remained. He read them. Operational Summary. Special Reconnaissance Team. Mountain Terrain Western Region. Team compromised on Day 3. Team leader killed in initial contact. Communications specialist wounded left arm. Junior operator assumed command. Fighting withdrawal. 23 kilometers. 14 hours of continuous engagement. Full team extracted. Hostile combatants eliminated in the course of withdrawal. Call sign Desert Hawk. Commendation recommended. Commendation subsequently withdrawn following internal review of rules of engagement compliance. Subject offered voluntary separation from special operations assignment in lieu of court-martial. Subject accepted. All records classified. Reassigned to standard infantry unit with reduction in rank. He read it twice. Then he looked at Vance. She was still watching the terrain, still making her small, precise notes. The desert was quiet around her, and she sat inside that quiet the way a stone sits inside water entirely belonging to it. Marsh set the tablet down. He thought about a junior soldier in mountain terrain watching her team leader go down and making the decision to assume command, not because she was authorized to, but because she was the only one still standing who could do what needed to be done. He thought about 23 kilometers of fighting withdrawal in 14 hours. He thought about the particular arithmetic of keeping people alive when everything around you is organized toward killing them. He looked at her hands. Steady now. He thought about what it cost to learn that kind of steadiness and what it cost to be punished for having it and what kind of person keeps showing up after that. She turned and looked at him. Not startled. She had known he was there. She had known what he was reading. She let him read it because she had made her peace with being known, or at least with being known by people who were not going to do anything useful with the information. 4 years ago, he said, yes. You led the withdrawal. Someone had to. They stripped your rank for it. They stripped my rank for disobeying a direct order, she said. There is a difference, and it matters. He thought about that. You saved your team. I lost my team leader, she said. I got my communications specialist shot through the shoulder. He cannot lift his left arm above his head anymore. She looked back at the terrain. Every decision has a cost. I made decisions that cost people things they cannot get back. The fact that the alternative was worse does not make the cost disappear. Marsh was quiet for a moment. Would you do it differently? She did not answer immediately. She watched the eastern horizon where the sky was beginning its first almost imperceptible shift toward morning. No, she said finally. But that is not the comfort you might think it is. Knowing you would make the same choice again just means you understand why you are where you are. She turned back to the notebook. He sat with her in the quiet of the early morning, the desert cold and still around them, and he thought about the particular kind of soldier who gets buried alive by the system they serve and keeps showing up anyway, not because they have forgiven the system, but because the alternative is leaving people without someone who knows how to keep them alive. The sun was beginning its approach to the horizon, the sky shifting through the dark blue of pre-dawn toward something lighter and more honest. Whatever was coming next would come with the light. The sun came up over the eastern ridgeline and made the desert look clean. It was not clean. There were craters where the mortar rounds had walked across the perimeter. There was a section of southern wire that had been blown flat and not yet repaired. There were dark stains in the sand near the casualty collection point that the light made visible in ways the darkness had been merciful enough to conceal. But the light came anyway, indifferent and absolute, the way desert light always came, and it made everything sharp and specific and real. Marsh walked the perimeter at first light the way he always did, checking positions, counting faces, making sure the people who were supposed to be there were there. 6 fresh soldiers from the helicopter reinforcement had integrated into the defensive line without friction. They had heard what happened during the night. They were quiet around Vance in the particular way soldiers are quiet around someone who has just done something they cannot fully process. Not unfriendly, just careful. Ryder was on the radio with Battalion when Marsh returned to the command position. His voice had changed since the night before. Not weaker, differently weighted. The voice of a man who has revised his understanding of something important and is still working out the implications. Vance was cleaning her rifle. She had field stripped it completely, the components laid out on a cloth with the particular precision of someone for whom disorder is not a style preference, but an operational liability. Her hands moved through the components with the automatic ease of long practice. Barrel bolt carrier firing pin, everything in sequence. Everything inspected, everything returned to exactly where it belonged. Marsh sat nearby and drank coffee that tasted like it had been made with sand and good intentions, and he watched the perimeter and waited for whatever came next. What came next was Major Renata Holt. Her vehicle arrived at grid 790 minutes after sunrise, raising a thin plume of dust visible for 2 kilometers. She stepped out with the particular economy of movement that senior officers develop over years of needing to appear unhurried in situations that were anything but. She was in her mid-40s, lean and direct, with the kind of face that had been weathered into something more interesting than it had started as. She looked at the battle damage first, walked through it without speaking, hands clasped behind her back, eyes moving across crater positions, wire damage the burned hull of the technical vehicle visible on the northern ridge. Then she looked at the defensive positions. Then she looked at Vance. "Lieutenant," she said to Ryder, "walk me through it." They moved together through the position, and Marsh fell in behind them because it was his right as senior NCO and because he wanted to hear what Ryder said. They stepped over a mortar crater near the eastern wire. They stopped at the southern fighting positions, the ones that had been vacated 12 minutes before a second mortar round hit them directly. Ryder talked. He was precise and specific, and he did not embellish, and he did not minimize. He described the 3-directional assault, the loss of artillery support, the technical vehicle on the northern ridge, the decision to shift tactical control. Holt stopped walking when he said that last part. "You shifted tactical control to a private first class," she said. I gave her permission to coordinate defensive fire, Ryder said. Yes, ma'am. On what basis? He looked at her directly. On the basis that she was the most qualified person in the position and I was running out of options and soldiers. Holt was quiet for a moment. How many enemy casualties? 14 confirmed during the primary engagement, Marsh said from behind them. An additional 22 probable during the assault element's withdrawal based on thermal observation. Friendly casualties, 4 wounded, 1 critical now stable, no killed in action. Holt looked at the terrain. She did the arithmetic that any officer does when presented with those numbers. 70+ attackers. Single understrength platoon. No artillery, no air support for 45 minutes. 4 wounded and no dead. She turned and walked back toward the command position, and Marsh understood they were going to have a different conversation now. Ryder, she said, I need you on the battalion net. There are convoy coordination issues and I need my best communicator on them. Go. He went. He understood what she was doing and he went without objection because he trusted what she was doing even if he was not sure what it was yet. Holt stopped in front of Vance. Vance was on her feet, rifle assembled and slung posture correct without being performative. She looked at the major with the same flat attention she applied to everything. Not insubordinate, not deferential, present. Walk with me, Holt said. They moved along the perimeter together and Marsh followed at a distance close enough to hear far enough to be plausibly unobtrusive. The sun was climbing and the temperature was climbing with it, and the desert was becoming its daytime self, hostile and indifferent and beautiful in the way of things that do not care whether you find them beautiful. Lieutenant Ryder told me what happened last night, Holt said. He was thorough. She paused. He also told me it was not his victory. Vance said nothing. That kind of honesty from an officer is rarer than it should be, Holt said. It made me curious about what he thought he was looking at. She looked at Vance sidelong. So I pulled your file this morning. Vance's expression did not change. What there was of it, Holt said. They walked for a moment without speaking. A hawk turned slow circles above the ridgeline to the north, riding thermals that were already building despite the early hour. Operation Coldstone, Holt said. Vance kept walking. I have clearance you do not know about, Holt said. Not everything was redacted from my copy. She let that sit for a moment. 23 kilometers, 14 hours. Full team extracted. A pause. 37 enemy combatants, Holt said quietly. In 14 hours of continuous contact. In mountain terrain. With a wounded communications specialist and no support. The hawk banked and disappeared behind the ridge. They punished you for it, Holt said. They punished me for the decisions that made it necessary, Vance said. There is a distinction. Holt glanced at her. You keep making that distinction. Because it matters. I knew the orders. I chose to violate them. The outcome does not change the choice. Holt was quiet for a moment. Do you know why your commendation was withdrawn? She said. Vance did not answer. It was not entirely about the rules of engagement violation, Holt said. That was the official reason. The real reason. She stopped walking and turned to face the terrain, hands behind her back. After your debrief, Special Operations Command ran every evaluation they had on you. Psychological, tactical marksmanship, decision-making under stress. She paused. You exceeded every parameter they knew how to measure. Not by a margin. By a distance that made the margin irrelevant. Vance stopped beside her. There is no place in a command structure for someone who makes correct decisions faster than the structure can authorize them, Holt said. You become unpredictable. Not because you are unstable, because you are better. And better in a hierarchy is its own kind of problem. She turned to look at Vance directly. So they buried you, reduced your rank, reclassified your records, reassigned you to standard infantry, and hoped you would either conform or quietly separate. She looked back at the terrain. 4 years later, you are still here. Vance looked at the horizon. Where else would I go? She said. Holt studied her profile for a long moment. Then she said, there is a situation developing at Grid 12. A patrol was pinned down 40 minutes ago. Sniper Network 3 confirmed positions, 17 soldiers unable to move. They have been requesting precision support since the contact began. Vance turned to look at her. I have not authorized anything, Holt said. I am telling you about a situation that exists. A silence settled between them, the particular silence of two people who understand each other precisely. How far? Vance said. 6 kilometers northeast, Holt said. Vehicle accessible to within 2. Vance looked at her for one more second. Then she turned and walked toward the vehicle park at a pace that was not quite running but covered ground efficiently. Holt, Vance said without turning. I need a driver and coordinates. I have not authorized, Holt began. When you finish authorizing, Vance said, still walking, they will have been in contact for over an hour. She did not look back. I need a driver. Holt stood where she was. Marsh was at her shoulder. He had not intended to speak, but he heard himself say quietly, I will drive. Holt looked at him. Her expression was unreadable in the way of someone who has made a decision they know they cannot officially make. She said nothing. Marsh took that as what it was. He went to get the keys. The drive took 11 minutes on terrain that was not designed for vehicles and did not apologize for it. Marsh drove and Vance sat beside him with her rifle across her lap and her eyes on the terrain ahead, reading the ground the way a person reads text, continuously and without apparent effort. She said nothing for the entire 11 minutes. When they came to the point where the vehicle could go no further, she was out of the door before he had fully stopped moving uphill through the rocks at a pace he had to push to match. She found her first position 400 meters above the pinned patrol. What happened next? Marsh watched through binoculars from a position 30 meters behind her, and he watched it the way you watch something that you know you will spend the rest of your life trying to describe accurately to people who will not quite believe you. She did not move quickly. That was the first thing. Speed was not the point. Precision was the point, and precision required stillness, and stillness required patience. And patience was the one resource she had in absolute abundance. The first sniper position revealed itself when its occupant shifted to engage a soldier in the patrol who had tried to move. The shot gave away the location. Vance fired once before the echo of the enemy shot had finished traveling across the valley. She was already moving to a second position before the result was confirmed. The second sniper position was better concealed. It took her 22 minutes to locate it. Marsh watched her work, moving in short, careful increments across the rocky terrain, never exposing herself above the skyline, using the ground the way it was meant to be used as cover and as information. She found the position by watching where the patrol was not looking, reasoning backward from the patrol's behavior to the angle of threat they were responding to. She fired twice from the second position. The first round hit the rock face beside the concealed sniper. The second did not miss. The third position was the most dangerous because whoever was in it had seen 2 of his colleagues go silent and understood what that meant. He began to move, a moving target at range in broken terrain with no predictable pattern. Marsh watched Vance go completely still. She lay on a flat section of rock with her cheek against the stock, and she did not move for 4 minutes and 30 seconds while the third sniper moved through the terrain below, working his way toward a new position. She was not tracking him. She was reading the terrain ahead of him, identifying the place he was moving toward, the place the ground itself would funnel him through, the one point where his options narrowed. She waited. The sniper arrived at the point she had identified. She fired once. The patrol began to move within 90 seconds of the third shot, cautious at first, then faster as the understanding spread that the weight pressing down on them from the ridge lines had been removed. Marsh counted the patrol as they consolidated below. 17 soldiers, all of them moving, none of them being carried. He looked at his watch. 5 hours and 50 minutes since they had left Grid 7. Vance came back down through the rocks at the same unhurried pace with which she had gone up, rifle on her shoulder, eyes still moving across the terrain out of what appeared to be simple habit. She did not look pleased with herself. She did not look like anything except a person who had completed a task and was now moving on to whatever came next. She got in the vehicle without speaking. Marsh drove back. Major Holt was waiting outside the command position when they returned. She looked at Vance and then at Marsh and then back at Vance with the expression of someone confirming a calculation they had already done in their head. The patrol, Marsh said. All accounted for, Vance said. 3 sniper positions neutralized, no further threat in that grid as of an hour ago. Holt nodded once. Come with me, she said to Vance. They walked behind the supply depot away from the activity of the position, and Marsh drifted after them, because at this point he had given up pretending he was not paying attention. Holt took a folder from under her arm and held it out. This came from Division this morning, she said. Special Operations Command has been monitoring communications traffic from this grid since last night. She waited while Vance looked at the folder without taking it. They want you back. Vance looked at the folder. Full reinstatement, Holt said. Rank restored, return to operational status. Everything that was taken from you 4 years ago offered back with a signature. Vance took the folder. She opened it with one hand and read through it in the way she did everything thoroughly and without unnecessary movement. Marsh watched her face. Nothing changed in it. No relief, no satisfaction, no anger. Just the flat processing of information. She closed the folder. She held it back out to Holt. Holt did not take it immediately. "You understand what you are declining," she said. "Yes, ma'am." "You are declining your rank, your record, the acknowledgement of everything you did that they refused to acknowledge for 4 years. Vance kept the folder extended. "I am declining the opportunity to become what I was before," she said. "That person was effective. She was also alone in a way that I did not understand was a problem until I had 4 years to think about it." Holt took the folder. "Vance said last night I coordinated a defensive action with 9 other people, and we held a position against 70 attackers, and everyone came home. This morning I went to Grid 12 and I removed 3 threats, and 17 people could move again." She looked at Holt directly. "That is enough. That is what I am. Not a strategic asset, not a program, just someone who is good at keeping people alive when they are close enough for me to do something about it." Holt studied her for a long moment. "They will send people to convince you," she said. "Offers, arguments, possibly orders." "Let them," Vance said. "And if they order you back into special operations?" Vance was quiet for a moment. "Then I will deal with that when it happens," she said. "Right now, I am a private first class in a platoon that needs me here." Holt looked at her for a long time. Long enough that Marsh began to feel the weight of the silence. Then she said, "For what it is worth. What you did last night. The defensive coordination, the tactical decisions, keeping those soldiers alive in a position that should have been overrun." She paused. "That was the finest performance under combat conditions I have witnessed in 21 years of service." Vance nodded once. "I don't need it on record," she said. "I just need it to be true." Holt walked away. Marsh stood beside Vance in the space behind the supply depot, and the desert pressed in from every direction with its heat and its silence and its absolute indifference to what had just happened. After a while, Webb appeared around the corner of the depot with the particular expression of a man who had been rehearsing something. He was holding a folded piece of paper. Marsh recognized the careful expression on Webb's face, the look of someone who does not know how to give something to a person who does not ask for things. "We all signed it," Webb said. He held out the paper. "It is a letter of commendation. We want to submit it to battalion. You should get your rank back. You should get all of it back. We talked about it and every single person in this platoon signed it, and we want you to have it." Vance looked at the paper. She did not take it. "Don't submit it," she said. Webb's expression shifted. "What?" "Don't put my name on official documents. Don't draw attention to what happened here." She looked at him steadily. "The moment that letter goes up the chain, people start asking questions. People with clearances I don't want them using. People who will decide what I am before I can decide it myself." "But you deserve." "I deserve to be left alone to do my job," she said. "That is what I deserve." Webb stood there holding the paper, and Marsh could see him working through it. The particular frustration of a person trying to give someone something they clearly should want and being refused. Then he put the paper down on a supply crate beside her. "I'm leaving it here," he said. "You do what you want with it. But everyone in this platoon knows what you did. Everyone knows who you are." He walked away. Vance looked at the paper for a moment. Then she picked it up and unfolded it carefully. Marsh watched her read it. He watched something move through her face that was not quite any single thing. Not pride and not sentiment and not relief. Something that had been held in a particular position for a long time very carefully and was now being allowed to shift slightly just enough to breathe. She refolded the letter and put it in the inside pocket of her jacket against her chest. Then she picked up her rifle and started walking back toward the perimeter. Marsh fell in beside her. "The letter," he said. She said nothing for a moment. "From the withdrawal," she said finally. The mountain operation. There was a boy, 12 years old. He was about to be executed when I made the decision to engage. She kept walking. He survived, made it out with the others into the hills. 2 years later, I got a letter forwarded through about 6 different channels. She paused. He is studying engineering now. Wants to rebuild what was destroyed. She touched the outside of her jacket pocket for a moment. Just briefly. I have carried that letter for 2 years, she said. I do not need another one, but I will keep this one too. They reached the perimeter, and she took her position at the edge of it and looked out at the desert the way she always looked at it, with the flat, continuous attention of someone for whom the world beyond the wire was never fully safe and never fully foreign. The radio crackled. Any station, this is Reaper 44. We have a developing situation at Grid 19. Multiple hostile contacts requesting any available precision engagement capability. How copy over? Vance looked at the radio. Marsh watched her. She picked up the handset, held it for a moment. He could see her considering something, not the mission she had already decided about the mission, but something else. Something about how to enter a thing. What name to walk through the door with. She keyed the transmit button. Reaper 44, this is Vance. I have precision engagement capability. Send coordinates. Not Desert Hawk. Not a call sign from 4 years ago that belonged to someone she had decided to leave in the mountains, where that person had been forged and buried and resurrected and finally deliberately set down. Just Vance. The radio was silent for 3 seconds. Then the response came back, and the voice on the other end had in it a quality that people use when they are not sure they are hearing what they think they are hearing. Station identifying as Vance, please confirm your last. Over. She looked at Marsh. Something in her expression was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to the expression of a person who has made a decision they are at peace with. This is Vance, she said into the handset. Confirmed. Send the coordinates and tell your people to hold their position. I am on my way. She clipped the handset to her vest and slung her rifle and looked at Marsh with the flat directness that was simply her way of looking at the world. You driving, she said. He was already moving toward the vehicle. Behind them, without any order being given, without any announcement or formation or instruction, the soldiers of the platoon began to move. Webb checking his magazine, Cassell pulling on her pack, Decker arm bandaged standing up from the crate he had been resting on and reaching for his rifle with his good hand. Ryder appearing from the command position with his tablet already in his vest pocket and his weapon on his shoulder. Nobody called them. Nobody told them to come. They just came. Because in 3 days something had happened that did not have a name in any regulation or field manual. Something that had nothing to do with rank or authorization or the chain of command. Something simpler and older than any of that. They had watched her stand between them and the thing that was trying to kill them. And they had all made the same decision separately and without discussion that wherever she was going next, they were going to. The vehicles started. The desert opened up ahead of them, enormous and unforgiving, lit by a sun that did not care about any of this, stretching out toward a grid where 17 more people were waiting for someone who would not miss. Vance looked straight ahead through the windshield. Her hands were steady. They always were.